When we talk about processing speed skills, I'm always asking educators and parents, well, on what tasks are you talking about? Where are you concerned about processing speed skills? And so I'll often ask parents and educators to talk about what is their child being asked to perceive? So are they looking at a screen like you are now, where there are letters, which is verbal input, or where there are pictures, and that's nonverbal input? So first of all, knowing what is it that the child is seeing. Is it visual verbal? Is it visual nonverbal? And then I don't have it listed here, but what is the student hearing? Is the student hearing auditory verbal or auditory nonverbal information? So auditory verbal might be the words or sounds, and then nonverbal might be tone of voice or a passing fire engine siren. And so the other kind of input that I can talk about is just sensory input. How do you feel, with your senses? And the best example I can think of that I use in lectures is on Halloween. Sometimes there's a fun game that the kids play, and that is that they stick their hands into a paper bag and they feel what's inside without looking. And based on the feel, what is it? So if it's brains, is it spaghetti? you know, if it's eyeballs, is it a peeled grape kind of thing? So that's kind of a sensory input. So even though you don't see these different types of inputs, there are visual inputs, there are auditory inputs, and there are sensory inputs that are more tactile. So the next question I ask parents and educators is, okay, what's the output? What is the child being expected to do? And you'll notice that each of these outputs has the word motor there. So there's oral motor, which is speaking. That's an oral response where the mouth moves in a way that we can create sounds. And then fine motor, which is using our fingers. That could be holding a pencil or a paintbrush or a toothbrush, or typing on a keypad. Graphomotor is specifically related to letter formation. Grapho is letter, motor is motor, as you know. So graphomotor is really about, planning. Where does a pencil go on the page? What needs to be written with any clarity and legibility? Does the student start at the top of the page or the bottom? And of course, that includes issues relating to pencil grip, etc. And then gross motor has to do with moving the entire body. So that could be movement that includes, getting up from one seat and putting something in the trash bin, or it could be walking up the stairs. It could be OT, occupational therapy related. So when we're looking at processing speed skills, we have to ask, what is the most important aspect of this task? Is the most important aspect to read? Is it to listen? Based on reading or listening, what does the student need to do to show what was learned? Is it something that's going to be written or spoken or acted out or built or painted? So this is really important to look at. In what way are processing skills impacting the task? Now, in some cases, doing something quickly doesn't matter, but we don't have forever. And I think that's where parents get the most frustrated, especially with transitions in and out of the car for daily routines like going to school. And it's also frustrating for teachers because teachers believe that once they've given the instruction, that the students should internalize the instruction. But students with weak or slow processing speed skills are always proving that they're weak or slow. So every time a student is being asked to write, that's an issue for them. That's what they're proving. Now, what does oral motor as a response seem like with relation to processing speed skills? That's noticeable when a student is asked a question in class and they need time to formulate their oral response. So we're not just talking about only writing activities, we're also talking about oral activities. So for a student who often knows the answer but can't get it out, the words are like on the tip of their tongue, it's helpful, of course, to ask the questions in advance, have the student prepare, possibly rehearse if that's allowed, and then be able to answer the question without it being a surprise. And allowing a student to restate what they want to say, taking the second thing that the child has said or the third thing, not necessarily the first, and moving on to the next student. So for processing speed in terms of written expression, there are a lot of accommodations that many of you are familiar with, but they probably aren't enough to kind of alleviate the issues. So maybe we can do some brainstorming tonight. You may be putting items in the chat, but because of the way my computer is configured, I can't see it. So I'll look at that when I get the chance, but with the way
Actually,
we
I'm
started
tracking.
tonight.
Yeah, Elle and I are tracking the chat. So,
Okay, good. Yeah, because the way we started, I'm really leery to do anything, that won't be able to get me back to the start.
We can read you
But
the answers in the chat too.
okay, good. So I just want to say, as we leave this slide, that when we talk about processing speed, we can't isolate it. We have to look at it in terms of what the student is perceiving and considering whether it's visual or auditory or tactile, and looking at what it is that the student's being asked to do, whether it's oromotor, fine motor, graphomotor, or gross motor, so that we can determine what's the most salient aspect of that task. Is the most salient aspect of that task to know something or to write it? And so we kind of enter the conversation in terms of what's a crutch, but that's premature, but we will talk about that. So, parents will ask me during homework time, how do we keep homework from taking 3 hours? And so I go through this process. Well, what's the input? What's the output? What are the expectations? Are the expectations relevant for the child's age and grade level? And then what are the issues? Because then we can decide the best way to support the child, especially, and I'm coming back to this slide, especially the child who has these superior cognitive abilities where written expression may not be the best way for them to show what they know.